Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to give everyone just a minute or so to get logged on, and then we will begin. Thanks for being here. All right, good afternoon. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Christine Anderson. I am the Anti-Trafficking and Runaway and Homeless Youth Coordinator here at OCFS in the Division of Youth Development and Partnerships for Success. In that role, I serve as Program Manager for the Safe Harbor New York program, and that's what brings us here today to day 2, session 2 of our 6th annual Anti-Trafficking Summit. A few quick housekeeping items. As you know, Summit is a week-long event with sessions held every afternoon this week. There is one at 12:30 p.m. every day and one at 2:30 every day but Friday. Zoom links for those sessions were sent out already. If for some reason you have not received the Zoom link for a session you registered for, please reach out to one of us and let us know, and we will get that to you as soon as possible. If you encounter IT issues with your presentation, you can email info@welfareresearch.org, and they will be happy to help you as best as they can. If you encounter IT issues during the presentation, so you're still present, but you're having some issues, you can type a note in the chat and we will get help to you as soon as we can. All of our presentations are being recorded and they will be available after the fact. And we are issuing attendance certificates for those folks who request them. It is not standard procedure. So if you need a certificate of attendance, all you need to do is email the human trafficking mailbox here at OCFS. I'll put that in the chat and we will get you a certificate. Please keep in mind that no certificates will be issued until all of Summit is over. So you're welcome to ask now, but it takes us a week or 2 after Summit to get those out. So just please be patient with us. We did not forget about you, I promise. Next week, you'll also receive a post-Summit survey. We use all of that feedback to incorporate it into future trainings and offerings for our Safe Harbor and anti-trafficking folks. So we would really appreciate if you would take the time to complete them and get them back to us. And lastly, and probably most importantly, all participants are muted during the presentation so we can focus on the amazing trainings we have to offer. Every presenter has about 45 minutes of content to share, and then there will be time at the end for questions and answers. We ask that you put all of your questions in the chat as it will be monitored, and that is in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Please make sure it says that it is going to the host and panelists. We do ask that you try to save your questions till the end, as we won't be able to answer them until the end. But if you are like me and need to say something right now, otherwise you will forget, feel free to put it in the chat at any time. If for some reason we run out of time and don't get to your question, we have access to the chat after the fact, and we will get you an answer to your question, I promise. With all of that said, I want to take a minute and introduce our amazing presenters today. Dr. Samantha Saul, I hope I said that correctly, Samantha, is the supervisor of the Child Sex Trafficking Recovery Services team at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Prior to joining her team at NCMEC, she coordinated the response to child sex trafficking in New Orleans. She has provided training and technical assistance throughout the state of Louisiana and nationally on child sex trafficking identification and response. She has completed a Doctor of Social Work degree with the University of Southern California and focused her doctoral research on youth voice and choice through shared decision-making tools and practices. Joining her today is Jewel Copeland. She's a resource specialist on NCMEC's Child Sex Trafficking Recovery Services team, and she is responsible for our Northeast region. She comes to NCMEC with several years of experience working directly with youth in care who have experienced child sex trafficking. She served as a specialized CST caseworker in Los Angeles County's child welfare system, working closely with law enforcement and service providers in LA's first responder protocol during recoveries of children missing from care. And she's provided intensive case management to survivors with an organization called MISSY. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Jewel. Sorry if I did not. She holds a BA in psychology from CA State University, Long Beach, and is finishing up her master's in social work, emphasizing in trauma practice at Simmons University. I am thrilled they are here. I've had the pleasure of working with them before. You are in for a treat. Samantha and Jewel, you're up.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christine. All right, let me share my screen. Here we go. Well, we are very excited to be here with you today and tell you more about some of our programs at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We will give you kind of a brief overview in general of our response to child sex trafficking at NCMEC or the National Center, but we really are going to dive deep today into our newest team at the National Center that Jewel is a member of and that I am the supervisor of, which is our Child Sex Trafficking Recovery Services team. So we're excited to get to that part of the presentation as well. Just to start off on the same page with a little bit of background about NCMEC, for those of you who aren't as familiar or who haven't worked with us in the past, we are a nonprofit and non-governmental organization founded in 1984 by John and Reeve Walsh. NCMEC is congressionally funded in part to operate 15 different programs related to missing and exploited children. So we won't be diving into all of those today, but there is a ton more information available on our website and also some handouts that we'll be sending out in the chat during this presentation. So we also serve as a national clearinghouse and a resource center for families, for law enforcement, child welfare professionals, and other professionals that are serving missing and exploited children. So we're excited to share some of those resources with you today. So everyone at the National Center is working hard to fulfill our mission, which is threefold. It is to find missing children, to reduce child sexual exploitation, and to prevent future victimization. And we are all motivated by hope. So we hope that all missing children will be found safely, and we hope that they will all heal from anything that they may have experienced while they were missing. So we have a lot of different prevention material, and these are available on our website. I do encourage you to take a look. Our most well-known material are KidSmart and NetSmarts, which are two different curriculums that are designed to help teach children how to stay safe, both online and offline. We also have an app that's available for parents to download. So if they do have a child that goes missing, this app really walks them through what to do in real time in order to make that report and be connected to all of the available resources that we have at the National Center that they may have in their community as well. So just a plug for some of the amazing resources that we have. And one more, we have a free online training platform called NCMEC Connect. So if you haven't yet, I encourage you to set up an account. If you're quick, there's a little QR code on the bottom of the screen. But we've revamped this platform in 2020 to really break it down by discipline. So we have trainings that are specific just for law enforcement to access and other disciplines as well. And then in 2021, we launched a brand new 3-part training series for child sex trafficking. So it's more of a 101 training module. There's 3 parts to it. And this is a required prerequisite for some of the more advanced trainings that we'll be putting out in the next year or two. One specific for law enforcement on child sex trafficking recoveries and really focusing on how to effectively engage with these youth at the time of recovery to prevent re-traumatization. And then one specifically for child welfare that will be coming out soon after. So we're excited for these to come out and to share them with your communities as well. So as I mentioned, NCMEC operates several programs related to missing and exploited children, and we won't have time to dive into all of these today, but if you do not already have it, I do encourage you to jot down our call center or hotline phone number, which is this 1-800-THE-LOST. This is a hotline that operates every day, 24/7. We have access to many different languages, and this call center is available to take reports of missing children from parents or law enforcement or other legal guardians, but also to receive tips or sightings. So if someone sees a NCMEC missing child poster and then they think they've spotted that child in the community, or they think they have more information about that child, anyone's able to call into this hotline to provide that information to the case to make sure that we can get that information directly to law enforcement. Our call center also takes reports or questions of people that are wanting to know more about all of these different resources we have, questions about fundraising or events or trainings like this. So it's a great phone number to have and kind of an all-around one-stop shop resource. So I won't be diving into a lot of these teams today, but all of the information for them is also available on our website. Each one of them would be kind of an hour-and-a-half presentation on their own. I think, like many people at NCMEC before coming to work here, I really only knew the tip of the iceberg of just the incredible resources that we have available at the center. But today we're going to dive really specifically into our response to child sex trafficking, which is just one of the main issues that we focus on at the National Center, because we know that child sex trafficking is a missing child issue. That children who have ran away from home or from foster care or social services placements are just so much more vulnerable to being targeted by a trafficker. So we have really spent time over the last several years developing a response to child sex trafficking that is child-centered, survivor-informed, and trauma-informed to make sure that we're really providing the best support possible to these cases. So I'll walk through what happens in just a minute when a case is reported missing to NCMEC, and we've identified that there's a concern for child sex trafficking for that youth, and some of the support that we're able to provide in identifying that child and locating them and supporting their recovery. Also some of the information that we're able to collect and compile about the potential victimization or other youth that they might be missing with, or information about a potential trafficker. And we're able to send that information directly to law enforcement. Again, training and awareness, just like this one today, and through everything that we do at NCMEC, we really work on prioritizing survivor leadership and voice. So we have the absolute privilege and honor of working closely with a survivor expert working group that over the last few years has been really evaluating and providing great insight into everything that we do at the National Center to make sure, again, that it is trauma-informed, child-centered, and survivor-informed, and really doing the best work we can at locating, identifying, and supporting these children. So I mentioned our call center, 1-800-LOST, great number to have, but then we also have our cyber tip line. So this is this www.cybertipline.org, and this is a website that anyone from the public, but also electronic service providers like Facebook, Instagram, some of those sites, are able to submit reports of information that they're seeing online when there's a concern for exploitation of a child. So concerns for child sex trafficking, or websites that they're seeing child sexual abuse material on, or any other concerning things that you're seeing. This website is available for anyone to submit a tip to our cyber tip line. So like I mentioned, we know that child sex trafficking really is a missing child issue. Trends show us that when children run away, they're frequently running either from harm or they're running to harm, and they're so much more vulnerable to a trafficker, identifying them as having unmet needs and really exploiting those needs. So we had, I think it was over 26,000 reports of missing children in 2020 alone. And of those missing children that were reported to us, we identified that 1 in 6 of them were likely victims of child sex trafficking while they were missing, right? So just a huge percentage of these kids that we're seeing some concern for child sex trafficking. Some more information about what we saw in 2020. The average age of child sex trafficking victim reported to us is only 15 years old. In 2020, we assisted with about 17,000 reports related to possible child sex trafficking, and these reports were in every state in the United States, both from urban areas and rural areas, and cases reported to us involved children of all genders, all races and backgrounds. So I think what's important to note here, though, is that all of the data that we have at the National Center really only reflects children that were reported missing to us. And we know that there are so many children out there that are being trafficked and they're at their own homes, they're not missing, right? Familial trafficking. And then so many youth that are missing and experiencing child sex trafficking that aren't reported to us. Whether no one knows that they're missing or they're experiencing homelessness. So these numbers are really only showing us a small percentage of the child sex trafficking that's happening in this country. We still think it paints an important picture of what we're seeing here. So interestingly, when we look at the legal guardian of the children that are reported missing to us in general, so all kids, not just child sex trafficking victims, over the period of about the last 16 years, 36% of those kids were missing from their biological family, from their parent or other legal guardian, and 62% of all of the missing children that we've seen were missing from the care of foster care or social services. But when we look at these same numbers for children that we've identified as victims of child sex trafficking or likely victims, the percentage of those kids that were missing from the care of social services or foster care is so much higher, so 77%, with only 22% of these youth missing from their biological families. So we know that kids in care are just so much more vulnerable, again, to going missing, either from having unmet needs in their placement or home or from prior trauma that they experienced before coming into care. We know that these children are so much more vulnerable to a trafficker identifying them and exploiting them. I think another important thing to note here and why these numbers might be so much higher is related to the passing of the 2014 Preventing Sex Trafficking and Strengthening Families Act. So this act, among many amazing things it did, it required that child welfare professionals report children missing from care to NCMEC in addition to reporting them missing to law enforcement, just to really make sure that there's a robust and coordinated response to trying to locate these missing children. And that act that was passed is also really the impetus for the creation of this new team, the Recovery Services team. So I'm just going to quickly walk you through what happens when a child is reported missing to the National Center from intake to the time of recovery, and then we'll really dive deep into this Recovery Services team and how we're really supporting planning for that recovery as well. So some of this might be known to some of you on the call that make these phone calls or use this web reporting form on a daily basis, but there are 3 different ways that children can be reported missing to NCMEC. One is by calling into our call center, or 1-800-THE-LOST. 2, and this one's just for child welfare professionals, is using our web reporting form, which is at our Children Missing from Care microsite. We can make sure to put that information in the chat if anyone needs access to it. And then we do actually have a few states that have created a direct system-to-system connection between their child welfare system and our missing child reporting system, so that when they're submitting missing child reports in their system, it's automatically coming over to us. We believe Florida and Wisconsin are the 2 states right now, but that is something that's available if other states are interested in creating that connection. There are a lot of questions that are asked in the web forum, and then also when you call into the hotline to make that missing child report. So I'm going to walk through why we ask so many questions, how that information is used to help locate that child. But at the time of intake, the information that we're gathering, the questions we're asking, is also used to help us determine if there's a concern for child sex trafficking while this child's missing. And if there is, we have specialized teams at NCMEC that those cases are going to. Also at the time of intake, we're asking for photographs, really recent photographs of these children that are used for their missing child poster that's created. And then I'll also walk through some of the other ways that those photographs are used, but really important that we're getting a recent updated photograph, that if there's any identifying information about that child, like special tattoos that they have or piercings, or that they often change their hair color or things like that that are really relevant to looking for them, then that's really important information for us to receive as well. So after that report is made, if we do identify that there's a concern for child sex trafficking, that case is likely going to go to a specialized child sex trafficking case manager. We have an incredible team of case managers at NCMEC that really serve as the primary point of contact between that child's legal guardian, so either a parent or child welfare, and law enforcement, and then also all of our internal resources at the National Center. So they are collecting all the information that comes in at intake. They're reaching out to collect more information. They're creating and disseminating missing child posters that you can see on our websites and search to see if a child that is missing in your area has been reported with us. And also really targeting special areas to disseminate those posters to, based on the information that they're collecting around where that child might be, or where they might have family, or where they might have ran in the past. Our case managers are also collecting this information and giving it to our team of child sex trafficking analysts, So I'll walk you through a little bit about what that team does. And then they're referring to other internal resources at the National Center that I'll walk through as well. So again, this could be just an hour and a half, very interesting presentation alone on what our team of child sex trafficking analysts are able to do to support locating these children, but also oftentimes they are collecting information that can connect multiple missing children together, or that can file information about a potential trafficker. So we have a team of 13 specialized child sex trafficking analysts that are working all day, every day, really to support law enforcement efforts to locate these kids and to build potential cases by compiling this information for them. On the screen here, you can see some of the different data resource tools that they're able to use in these searches. And I think a lot of these tools are also used by law enforcement when they're looking for missing and exploited children or in their searches, but we know that law enforcement does not always have the resources, the manpower, or the time to sift through all of these different tools, or to scan back 3 years through a child's Facebook profile page, for example. And that's exactly the work that our analysts are doing every day. Because NCMEC is a nonprofit organization, we have been gifted licenses to all of the sites that you see here. So some of them that you see, TJ on the corner is Traffic Jam, and Telfinder in the opposite corner, and then Spotlight in the middle. Those are 3 different websites that are called ad aggregators. So these are tools that comb the internet, comb a lot of different websites, looking for ads of missing children that are being exploited. So if we're able to put in a photograph, these websites are looking for child sex trafficking ads that have an image similar to that child. So law enforcement has free access to Spotlight, but Traffic Jam and Telfinder are paid platforms. And sometimes these sites are combing different other sites and pulling up different hits or different information. So our analysts are always using all 3 of these tools when some law enforcement agencies might only be using 1 or 2. So we're really able to supplement the work that they're doing. I'll tell you my favorite story that can really exemplify the amazing work that our analysts are doing. But again, we could go on about this for so long, but Traffic Cam is another really interesting tool that we're able to use. And this is actually a free app that you can download on your phone, and you can submit photographs of the inside of hotel rooms to this app. And so if we find a child sex trafficking ad and there's an image in it where it looks like this child is posing in a hotel room, we are able to submit a sanitized version of that picture into this app to see if it matches the inside of a hotel room that's already been submitted. And that can really help us narrow down the brand or the type of hotel that this child might be in at that time, or even the very specific hotel that they might be in. So we had one really incredible situation where an ad was found. This child was seemingly in a hotel room, and our analysts used Traffic Cam to identify the brand or the type of hotel that we thought that picture was taken in. But in the picture, the analyst saw that outside the window in this hotel room where the child was, there was a specific kind of gas station. And so they knew the city that the ad was posted in, and they were able to narrow down to the exact hotel that that picture was taken in by figuring out where that hotel was next to that exact gas station. And using that information and giving it to law enforcement was able to go out and recover that child. So just some really, really amazing work that they're doing that we're really excited about, and to collaborate with them in all of these cases. Our analysts are also coming through the many different social networking sites that we know a lot of our kids are using these days, and are still accessing and using while they're missing. So we're not making fake accounts, we're not instant messaging children on any of these sites, but we have learned any available tools and tricks that exist to be able to view their information if it's not set to private, and to see if we're identifying any concerns for child sex trafficking in any of these sites. So we're looking at the language that they're using in their posts, if there's different emojis that we know of that are more indicative of child sex trafficking. But then also some of these sites, we know that kids are even being sold on, like Snapchat, and some of these other sites as well. So our analysts are combing through all of them. So one of the questions we ask when kids are reported missing is if their legal guardian or anyone in their life is aware of any of these sites that they're using and what their different screen names or usernames might be. And then, of course, the child sex trafficking ads that we're able to locate through some of those ad aggregator sites that I mentioned before. I'm sure many of you are aware that Backpage is no longer a site where human beings are being posted and sold. And once Backpage, that area of Backpage was shut down, these are now kind of the 4 main sites that we're seeing these ads pop up on. So Mega Personals, Erotic Monkey, Skip the Games, and Adult Look. And when we do find these ads and we think that the image in them might be the child that we have reported missing to us, there's a lot of information that can come up in these ads that we can send over to law enforcement to hopefully lead to a recovery of that child. So information, around where that child might be in that moment, or ways to contact them, telephone numbers that are associated with those ads that could be linked to a potential trafficker or someone else involved in trafficking that child. Oftentimes we're seeing other children that might be victimized that are in that ad as well. We actually had a situation really recently in New York State where we had a missing youth reported to us that was posted in these ads with another minor who we didn't know who that minor was. And our analysts, through just their incredible work, was able to ID that other youth that hadn't been reported missing to us, and coordinating with law enforcement in that child's home state to make sure that she was home safe and getting the resources that she needed after that child sex trafficking. So just to kind of tie that all together before I switch gears for the remainder of the time that I have with you. So when a child is reported missing from the National Center, either through our call line 1-800-LOST or the use of the web reporting form, we're triaging that case to see, is there a concern for child sex trafficking? We're looping in our specialized teams. Our case manager is really that primary point of contact, reaching out and collecting and verifying information about that child. They are creating that missing child poster, putting it up on our website, sending it out to the legal guardian and other targeted areas. They're really liaising between the legal guardian, law enforcement, and all of our internal resources at NCMEC, including our team of child sex trafficking analysts. And then at the same time, we have a few teams that are available to support the individuals caring for these youth once they return home or return to care. So I'll really be diving now into our specialized child sex trafficking recovery services team. So this is a quote that has been kind of our team motto. I think it really exemplifies the philosophy behind our team. So it's, when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows and not the flower. So we so often hear, when kids are missing from home or missing from care, and we think that there's that they're being exposed to child sex trafficking while they're gone. We hear a lot of conversation around, well, the child's running away, or their behavior, or labels that are put on that young person because of their behaviors. And our goal and our hope with this team is to really shift the focus to the environment that child ran from and the environment they'll be returning to, and looking at how can we create an environment in which they're really able to heal and thrive, in an environment in which they don't want to leave because they really feel safe and supported and heard. So that's really our goal with this team. Is looking at, what individuals are engaged in this child's life and how can we really support them. So from talking to child welfare and law enforcement around the country in terms of what they're seeing, what are some of the challenges they're facing, the successes that they're seeing, but also from talking to survivors about what they've experienced at the time of recovery and after. What we've learned is that moment of recovery, when a young person who is missing and being trafficked, when they first either return home on their own or encounter law enforcement or end up at a hospital, that moment is just such a crucial opportunity to engage with them and really begin to break the cycle of exploitation that they've been experiencing. And what we've heard is that moment, in some cases can go really well. And before coming to NCMEC, I was myself a part of many recoveries that went really well, where everybody engaged, the child welfare worker, law enforcement, some advocates, our forensic interviewers. they were ready, right? They had a plan in place. They had a good understanding of what that child's maybe experienced and how to engage with them and interact with them in a really trauma-informed and child-centered way. And I saw the positive impact that that had on that child. And then I've also been involved in recoveries where it maybe didn't go so well, where there wasn't a plan in place and everybody is just kind of scrambling at 2 a.m. in the hospital to try to find a placement or to call child welfare, and everyone's a little frantic. And I've seen the look on the child's face when that's happening, and kind of the distrust and the lack of faith in the system that can create for that child in that moment. So the goal of our team is to really focus on that moment of recovery, and starting with that moment is when we're really supporting the child and creating an environment that they're returning to where they can really heal and thrive. So we know that there are so many barriers and so many challenges that we face at the time of recovery, and that child is facing in that moment. So while the experience of every child is different and every survivor of child sex trafficking is different, these 6 things we have heard from almost every individual who's had this experience when they're being recovered. So the first question that they're often asking is, am I in trouble? So they've oftentimes had past experiences where they've encountered law enforcement and maybe they've been arrested because law enforcement doesn't see what's really happening behind them. Or situations where the trafficker has told them, you're going to get arrested, or this is your fault, or this is your choice. And they're wondering, is that true here? Am I in trouble? Am I going to detention? Is anyone going to listen to or believe me? Self-preservation. These kids have often found a way to really have their needs met when they're missing, whether that's, in really unsafe ways, but often, their basic needs, food, shelter, but also those social emotional needs. So when we're removing them from that situation, there's often this thought of, how are those needs going to be met now? Distrust. We know that there are many times where these children have often been failed by the systems that are designed to support them, or maybe promises were made that weren't kept, or maybe they've tried to tell somebody about something that's happened to them and felt like they weren't heard or they weren't believed. So there's so many things that they've often experienced by the time we're at this point of interacting with them and engaging with them. And it's so easy for me to understand why they might not trust us in that moment. They probably won't, and that's going to take time to build. Anger, again, from those negative experiences in the past, from not wanting to be removed from the situation, especially if they have an emotional connection with the person that's abusing them, which we know is so common for all forms of child abuse, and certainly often the case with child sex trafficking. Oftentimes these children are experiencing shame and guilt at the time of recovery. Traffickers just do such an awful job of manipulating these children into thinking that what they're doing is maybe all that they're capable of, or all that they're good for, and those thoughts and feelings can really be internalized into these youth. So when we're interacting with them, they might be really ashamed of what they've been through, or feeling like it might be their fault because the trafficker has told them that. And then of course, fear, right? We know that traffickers are often threatening children, that they will hurt them if they talk to anyone, that they'll, hurt their family member. So many things that they're afraid of in that moment. So if we're aware of everything that child's experiencing in that moment, it can help us do a better job of interacting with them and engaging with them. So on the next slide, I'm going to show a short video. So from the team of survivor experts that we work with at the National Center a few years ago, we interviewed some of them about some of the things that they've experienced at the time of recovery. And so I think hearing from them is just so incredibly powerful. So really talked in that video. A lot of them really talked in that video about that moment of recovery, of the first time when they re-engaged, with their parents or with law enforcement, and how they were kind of approached and treated in that moment, and how it made them feel. So we really believe that this moment of recovery, whether again they're returning on their own or law enforcement's finding them, it is a pause or a disruption in their victimization. And the more prepared we are for this moment, the better the outcome, right? So if we are intentional, trauma-informed, and victim-centered, we really have the potential to break the trauma bond or the victim cycle that's happening to that youth, and really work on building a healthy relationship and rebuilding trust and rapport. So we know that child sex trafficking cases are really complex. that if we are intentional, trauma-informed, and victim-centered, and really proactively plan for this moment of recovery, everything from, who is going to interact with, engage with that young person first, how are we going to engage with them, right? What are some strategies for how we're going to talk to them? What's going to happen next? How are we going to focus on their basic needs and making sure that they have food and clothing and medical care? We think that this, can have a lot of benefits, both in that immediate moment and in the long-term healing for that child, so that it will really increase opportunities for healing for that young person, increase the potential for them to actually engage in the services that we're trying to connect them to, especially if they feel like they have a choice and a voice in what those services are. Proactively planning for the recovery can really help us establish a trusted team that can immediately interact and engage with that young person, and then also after that point of recovery. Again, being intentional in this recovery can help us build trust with this young person, which is not only important for victim engagement and services, but also can help us potentially have better case outcomes for law enforcement, and eventually maybe even help prepare this child to be a part of a prosecution and help hold the adults that were harming them accountable. Opportunities to increase victim rapport and mitigate some of the challenges and barriers that I talked about prior to the video, but then also we can really help adjust and inform the expectations of those that are engaging with them at the time of recovery, right? We know that sometimes we think that we might be saving a child or taking them out of a really bad situation, and it can be confusing why they're angry or why they're afraid, or why they aren't telling us what we know is happening in that moment. So talking through, with providers and with people that are engaging with them at the time of recovery, what responses to complex trauma often look like, and all of the reasons why they might not be telling us what they're going through can help adjust and inform those expectations. So we know that children that have experienced child sex trafficking have often really had negative experiences in their past, that they've had trust broken and don't have a lot of great relationships in their life. This is a metaphor that Brene Brown uses on the marble jar, and we absolutely love it. And I think it really helps to show us how trust and relationships are really built over time, through consistency, through showing up, through small things that we're doing to show that child that we see them, that we care about them. So oftentimes these kids that they were engaging with, especially after recovery when they've been trafficked, they might be coming to us with a pretty empty marble jar, right? There haven't been a lot of good things happening where they've been able to build trust and build relationships. Times where their voice hasn't been heard, or someone hasn't showed up for them, or situations, especially with kids in care, where they have family members that have turned them away, and how harmful that can be to them and painful. So the things that we can do to help really refill this marble jar, it's going to take time. And some of these things are small, right? So I think we love to share this because we know it's not a magic wand. It's not like we recover this child and, we plan for that recovery and we know that that's immediately going to prevent them from ever running again. Instead, we're really looking at how over time we can reduce running behavior and really over time rebuild trust and relationships. So by keeping promises, by showing up consistently, seeking their input or opinion, being present with them, giving them your time, listening to them with empathy, are just some of the small things that we can do to help rebuild those relationships and trust over time. So when we talk to child welfare professionals and other MDT members about recovery planning, we really talk through that moment of recovery and then the first 48 hours as being the most important in building trust and trying to reduce the risk of that child immediately turning around and running away again. So we know that in these first 48 hours, engagement really has to be intentional and it has to be intense, right? We really need to be approaching that youth with a purpose and letting them know that we are here, that we do care, that we will be consistent and show up, regardless of how they are responding or treating us in that moment. It's also important to know that rest can be triggering for these kids, and they've oftentimes, when they're gone, just been in such like high intense, high energy situations where they haven't really been alone. And so sometimes we think, well, they must be tired, we're just going to let them rest and sleep for a while, but that can be scary for them if it's the first time in a while that they've been alone. So, having people nearby, having supports ready in case that, that rest is triggering for them. We talk about how when we're first engaging with that young person after a recovery, we have a lot of questions in that moment, but to try to really focus on only information that you really need at that point in time. Are there immediate medical needs that we need to care for? Or is there information that we really need to know for that child's care? But to leave questions about what was happening while they were gone or who they might have been with to a later time, and especially to when they might appear more willing and ready to talk about those things. We talk about really focusing on quick wins and small victories. So for example, if that child comes back on their own, that's a huge win, right? And I think sometimes, kids are faced when they return with like, where were you? Why did you leave? You're going to be in so much trouble. And that's going to tell them like, well, this maybe wasn't a good idea to come back. So instead of shifting that to like, we are so glad you came back. We're so happy to see you. Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Are you tired? What do you need right now? We can talk about everything else later. Other quick wins and, even smaller victories that can be scarier is when that child's still missing, but they reach out. And they reach out over social media, or they text their worker, or they text their therapist or somebody to check in, right? They're throwing out a lifeline. And that's just such an important opportunity for us to try to engage with them and let them know, I'm so glad to hear from you, right? And not to try to push them to come back immediately or say, well, I can only help you if you come back, but what do you need right now? Is there anything that I can do for you to help you be safe in this moment? Really looking for opportunities for connection. So something that our team talks a lot about is that having a relationship with just one safe, supportive, trusting adult is oftentimes all that it takes to really change the life of a child and support them in healing. So one of the first questions that we ask is does this young person have someone in their life that they have that kind of connection to? Especially, if in some communities that are lucky to have survivor leaders and survivor mentors that can be paired with these children to really support them in their healing process. Or do they have a coach or a therapist or their child welfare worker or someone else that they've really started to build rapport with? And how soon can we get that person to see that child after a recovery? We also really work on, again, normalizing expectations in that moment of recovery. So we know that children that have been trafficked, they have been in survival mode when they're missing, especially, and they have not even begun to start thinking about or processing their victimization. And when they come back into care, they're still in survival mode, right? They're still wondering, are my needs going to be met here? There's a lot of things they might be afraid of in that moment, and really working on protecting themselves. They're not used to, oftentimes, the adults around them protecting them in a safe way. So again, not pushing them to talk about what's happening or expecting them to be ready to process that. Also, and I think this is a really important one to talk about and a challenging one, especially for housing providers, but the reality is that victims that are under the control of a trafficker are often required to recruit other individuals into that situation. It's a part of the victimization. It's a part of being indoctrinated into that culture by the trafficker. And there's a lot of shame and guilt attached to that, but oftentimes it's also a survival mechanism, right? If the trafficker trusts you and is asking you to do things for them, that also means that you might not get hurt. So it's really part of the process. And we've seen that when certain labels like recruiter are placed on children, that it can create just so many barriers to placement, to service needs, and other things that this child really needs to heal. So one thing we're working on doing is just, educating their child welfare worker or others in their life around what recruiting really means in a trafficking situation, and how to really, still engage with that child in a safe way and support them in placements in a safe way. We also know that normal is not normal anymore. We shouldn't assume that these young people have a foundation for understanding what safe, stable, and healthy relationships look like. They often, might identify the relationship with a trafficker as the most stable or healthy one that they've had, right? Their perception of love is skewed, but then also their perception of safety and danger is very skewed, because oftentimes the people who are meeting their needs, who are protecting them in their mind, are also the people that are harming them and putting them in dangerous situations. So it takes a long time to really untangle all of that. And then with that being said, we know that stabilization and healing is often not a linear process, and that it often takes time. And that relapse or running away again or returning to that life is something that we really just need to expect is likely to happen. There's so many factors that come into play, and there's so many things that are either pushing them back or pulling them back into that life, and that this change process can take a lot of time, and we have to be consistent and we have to keep showing up. So I have one more video, and in this video, some of the survivors that work in our expert working group really talk about, in their experience, some of the reasons why they stayed with that trafficker, reasons why they returned, and some of the barriers to for them in engaging with service providers. Right. So we know that, and from some of the stories we just heard, that recovering this child or them returning home or to care is really just the first step in their healing process, and that there are so many needs that they have in that moment that are both tangible and intangible, and needs that the trafficker in a lot of these situations is often meaning for these children. So oftentimes our focus is really heavily on placement, right? Where are they going to go? What medical needs do they have? We need food, clothing, we need a psych eval, we need all of these things. We need to do them now. We need vocational training. And all those things are so needed and so important. But I think what is even more important, and what is more likely to be a reason that that child is going to stay for longer or stay for good or return to that trafficker is whether or not these intangible needs are being met. So these are some of the things that we're often talking through with child welfare professionals. It's really these needs for connection, for love and belonging that you heard a lot of the survivors talking about in that video, that the trafficker made them feel loved, made them feel heard and important, and really, saw them in a way that other people in their life weren't doing. So really looking at, again, how can we change the environment that these children are returning to into one where they feel hopeful, they feel, excuse me, supported and empowered, and they feel like people truly love them and care about them. So relationships are key in healing these youth. So we know that survivors of child sex trafficking, they have been hurt in relationships, and they will heal through healthy relationships. They've oftentimes been hurt in early childhood relationships with their family or with parents, and then they've been hurt in relationships with traffickers, with buyers, with people that, again, are telling them that they love them and care about them, but also harming them. But healing will also happen through relationships, relationships with people that we're able to connect them with in the community when they return. So relationships are really the key to healing. And I think from everything that you've heard today, some of the barriers that we face in engaging with these youth and what they're experiencing in that moment, I think it's easy now to understand why that child in front of us might be this porcupine, right? Might have a really tough exterior, might have attitude, might be frustrated with us, and that might come out in a lot of different ways. We also know how trauma can come out, in hypervigilance or in going from 0 to 100 when they're triggered if they don't have those coping skills developed. So it's really just important that we are approaching these youth with a strength-based perspective. We're really looking for quick wins and opportunities to praise them. Our leader of this team, our executive director of child sex trafficking programs, tells an incredible story of a youth that she was a part of the recovery. And this is something that she said to this child in that moment that really kind of helped ground the child and let her know that she was seen and cared about. And what she said was, "The fact that you are sitting here right now tells me something about you. It tells me that you are brave, that you're a fighter, and that you're able to survive impossible situations." Right? So just focusing on these positive things that we can see and that we can say about these youth in that moment, right? We don't know what they've been through. We can never imagine often what they've been through. But what we do know is that they are a survivor, right? They have survived, they are brave. And we need to really identify those strengths and help them build upon them. So our child sex trafficking recovery services team, Jewel is on the call with us today. She's the resource specialist assigned to the Northeast, including New York. So when we receive reports of children missing from care, we are then proactively reaching out to that child welfare professional or the legal guardian, or sometimes in New York City, it's even the placement staff that's supporting these young people. And we're helping them really plan for that moment of recovery. So we're talking through what needs that child might have in that moment, understanding complex trauma and child sex trafficking and how that child might present in that moment, and some of the things that might trigger them, and different strategies for teaching them coping mechanisms, or teaching them safety planning or harm reduction skills, looking for different opportunities for youth engagement and choice and voice in the process. And then we're also helping connect that child welfare professional to specialized resources in their community. So in New York State, we are lucky to have the partnership of all of the incredible safe harbor navigators that I think a lot of are on the call today. And so, our hope is to make sure that the child welfare professional in a specific region is aware of that resource and is aware of their safe harbor navigator. And if not, making that introduction and connections, that they're really able to tap into the resources that are available in their community as well. Our team, in addition to this, we say we are able to provide both top-down and bottom-up support on child sex trafficking cases. So that bottom-up approach is really direct support that we're providing to child welfare professionals, to law enforcement, other multidisciplinary team members around specific missing child cases. And our goal in these conversations is really to help change individual knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors around these children. So improving their knowledge around child sex trafficking and youth engagement strategies that I just mentioned. And their attitudes, oftentimes we might talk to a child welfare worker who's just exhausted and is burnt out and has been working with the same child for so many months or even years and has really tried everything. And our hope and our goal is to help them rebuild their sense of hope and empowerment and their ability to really engage with and support this young person and really approach them with a clean slate next time that they return. And then changing their behavior and the way that they might be engaging with and approaching that young person when they do return. Our team is also available to provide this top-down support. So any sort of training, assistance in developing protocols, or providing resources and tools to multidisciplinary teams or greater service systems to really help try to change the overall system response to identifying, locating, and supporting these youth. So here's a little map of just how our team is broken down. We are, as a brand new team, we are very small but mighty, we like to say. So Jewel, as you can see, has a pretty small but very dense region of the country that she's responsible for, and we have 4 other resource specialists that make up the team. We've actually, next week, we'll have our resource specialist starting in Region 4, where you see my name right now. I'll make sure that you guys have, one of our handouts is this map with also just some more information on the type of support that this team is able to provide and how you can get in touch with us if you'd like some assistance on a missing child case or a child sex trafficking case in your community as well. Before I wrap up and switch to questions, I just wanted to give one more quick plug for an incredible team at the National Center that is available to support family members. So our team works really specifically with children missing from care and with child welfare workers, but we also have our family advocacy division that is available to provide specialized support to family members of missing or exploited children. So they are reaching out to those parents, those family members, and providing crisis support over the phone. They're really talking them through what reunifying with that child might be like once they do return. And they can also connect that family to our amazing team HOPE, which is a team of trained volunteers that are parents or family members with lived experience of having a missing or exploited child. So they're really able to provide that peer-to-peer mentorship and support for parents while their children are currently missing or being exploited. And with that, here's my information. But again, it will be in the handout that you'll be receiving. So I think I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen so we can see if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Samantha and Jewel. I appreciate all that you all do and all of the support you've offered our programs in general, specifically the last few months. It's been such a pleasure working with you. I just want to remind folks, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. Please make sure they are directed to hosts and panelists. Otherwise, we can't see them. There's already one in there, so I'm going to read it off, because if I try to paraphrase, it is not going to come out correctly. So, given the incredible partnerships NCMEC has developed with leaders in data sharing and technology, in the data sharing and technology realm, curious to know NCMEC's thoughts on efforts to scan photos on users' phones for photos of possible exploitation. Do you think such methods, if allowed to be implemented, will help?
Oh, you guys are hitting me right away with a really hard question. I think the best thing I can do is direct you to some of the recent posts that we put out on our website that kind of dives in and answers some of these kind of data and technology sharing questions in a deeper way, and kind of where NCMEC stands on those things. I think they're all, really difficult conversations around balancing privacy and safety. So this, particular conversation, I think I'll point you to NCMEC's official kind of response on our website. So I will try to pull that up while I can find it. But there's a lot of different legislation that is currently being passed or being looked at right now, and we do have an incredible Office of Legal Support that is a team of attorneys that's able to really lobby and advocate for different issues like this. So they are now kind of posting some of those things on a blog that we have that I'll send you the link to in the chat. I can pull it up. But it's a really great question, and it's a really, really a challenging conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I was like, wow, Bridget's coming in hot.
Yeah.
I personally, my favorite part of this presentation, besides the impactful survivor videos, which I feel are so essential to the work that we do to really get that perspective, is I'm a huge Brene Brown fan, is the concept of the marble jar, right? And I think for most of us, just that concept of how we interact with people in general, whether they be the young people we're serving, their families, because many of them come from history of trauma, generational trauma, or just our collaborative works with each other. That's such a powerful thing to see when you visualize them. I think we all know it, but sometimes you need to see that graphic to really kind of remember that drives our work. So we talked earlier about how crucial those first few moments after recovery are, and that it's not always so smooth, as we know. So do you have any tips or tricks on how to navigate it when maybe the young person is I want to be very sensitive with my words here, not as willing to accept help or share, or they're giving you a lot of pushback because maybe they did not want to be recovered? I really am trying to be mindful of the language I use, because I know how important that is. So hopefully my point is getting across. But we know that that's a big part of the work we do. Not every young person is ready. So how can we navigate conversations?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a really relevant one. And I think, part of it is recognizing and understanding all of the reasons why they might not be ready, right? Of having an empty marble jar in that moment, or, everything they might be experiencing in that moment. And I think the other kind of important way to look at it or frame it is we talk about the stages of change model. So for those on the call that aren't familiar, it's really a longer conversation and a really presentation in and of itself, but it's this idea that in any change that we make in our life, and for these youth in this situation, like leaving trafficking situation or engaging with service providers, we go through this process. And what Christine's describing would be a youth that we would say is in this phase of pre-contemplation. So that means they don't see that there's a problem with their behavior. They think they're totally safe. This is their boyfriend, girlfriend. This is a situation that they want to be in. And if you approach them in that moment and say, this person's harming you, you're being trafficked, this is bad, they're not in a place where they can hear that, and that will actually push them further away from you. So like recognizing what stage of change they're in, and then there's different tips and tricks and strategies for really engaging with them in that stage. So pre-contemplation is the hardest one, because oftentimes when you're engaging with them, you are really planting a seed or trying to plant a seed, right? Where you're showing them, I'm just here to listen if you ever want to talk, or I'm going to keep showing up for you no matter what, right? It's this consistency that you're showing them. It's the little small things that were on that marble jar slide that I also love, to really over time be showing them that you are a safe person, they can trust you, and that, you know, if and when they decide that they're ready for help, sometimes is when they're going to come back and identify you as the person that they can approach in that situation. So it's the hardest part to engage with them in, and there's not a magic wand or a magic answer to that. And I think it takes time, and it takes consistency, and really believing in them too. And then, you know, if that child's in pre-contemplation, unfortunately, oftentimes that shift from contemplation to pre-contemplation happens because something bad happened, right? Something scary or traumatic, and it makes them think, well, wait a minute, like this isn't really a good situation that I'm in. So I think another strategy that we have in pre-contemplation, I think I mixed those up, I'm so sorry, pre-contemplation, is really just asking them questions, right? Like trying to understand, what are your dreams and goals, right? What's something that you want right now that we can help you accomplish, whether it's like educational or getting a job or connecting with a safe family member, or, trying to figure out what motivates them, talking through like what they want in a relationship, how they would describe a healthy relationship, and trying not to label some of the things that they're experiencing for them. So we can also, that's another kind of handout I can send you, Christina, we like to share, that's not ours, but really breaks down those stages. It's actually, no, that's a New York group by GEMS. They really break down the stages of change and like things you can really say in each stage.
That'd be great if you could, Samantha. The handouts Samantha is referencing will be distributed to those who are on the participation, can you tell it's the end of the day, list after the fact, so they will come out to you. And there's another question: how do we balance them being in the pre-contemplative stage with the fact that they are children and the need for us to keep them safe in the immediacy? Good question, Alicia.
Yeah, and that really is the $1 million question. And I think, again, there's not a magic answer to it, and the reality is that it takes time, and there's this incredible trainer that our team has tapped into, named Leslie Brown, out of Washington State, and she really talks about how we really have two choices here, and one is locked doors, and the other is relationships and healing, right? And it's that ultimately, oftentimes you see providers, because of a legal liability, but also because they're afraid and they care about this child, prioritizing this concept of physical safety, right? Of, I'm going to put this child behind this locked door because then I know that they are there. They are physically safe behind this locked door, right? But in doing so, we're oftentimes compromising their emotional safety, and their relational safety, right? And their ability to build those healthy relationships with us. And the second that door unlocks, they're gone, right? So it's a really hard question, and not an easy answer when you're the person that either has a loved one who you're worried about, or, a child that you care about and are legally responsible for that you're worried about. But the reality is that relationships are what are going to bring these kids back in, and that we might push them further away if we over rely on those kind of more locked door solutions.
Great, yes. You're getting a lot of thanks in the chat for all of your wisdom sharing and your amazing presentation, that you do wonderful and difficult work, which I second 1,000,000%, and how appreciative we all are. One other thing I want to touch on, because I think it's something that many of us sometimes forget about, is that this trauma and the trafficking doesn't just affect that young person, it affects their family and those who care about them immensely, because then you have more trauma. So can you talk to me a little bit, or us, excuse me, a little bit more about that family support program and kind of what that looks like in a nutshell? Obviously, I know it's probably pretty expansive, and how folks can make those connections.
Yes, we can. And let me also, that was one of the handouts that we'll send with a little bit more information on that team. And I will put their site on the chat as well, because they also have just some incredible resources that can be downloaded from this website in terms of like guides for parents of, you know, what to do if children go missing or how to support children upon recovery. That is right here. So that team, there's information on the website for how to reach out to them directly, and also on the handout that we just sent you. So they are a team of licensed clinicians, social workers, counselors that are just really the experts in supporting parents and family members. So they're available if children are missing or just any concern for exploitation or trafficking as well for children that aren't missing but are in the care of their families.
It's wonderful. And I think it's a resource that is probably underutilized, because I feel that often what I hear is there's some shame in that maybe you weren't the kind of parent you wanted to be, or you did something wrong, or you didn't do enough, or what have you. And I feel like providing that those mental health services and the therapeutic and just realizing you're not alone is probably immensely beneficial to their healing as well as the healing of their loved one.
Yeah, definitely. And we see that happen so much too when kids even maybe go to inpatient treatment facilities where they're getting a lot of help and support, but maybe not a lot is changing at home, or times like exactly what you mentioned where parents are experiencing this shame and guilt. And I remember one situation where a child returned home after doing a lot of work and was feeling like her father was ashamed of her, like couldn't even look at her. And that feeling of shame is what pushed her to run away again, when the reality in the situation was that the father was ashamed of himself for feeling like he wasn't able to protect the child. So these parents, you know, trafficking impacts that entire family and the entire community. And these parents need a lot of support when these kids are missing and in reunifying with them and when they're back at home too.
Wonderful. I think that that's probably a great place to wrap us up today, as there's no more questions in the, oh wait, hold on, there's one more question. You beat me to it. What do you suggest if on a hotline you receive a call from a child trapped in human trafficking and in the US, but they were brought in from another country? So now we're talking about not domestic.
Yeah, you guys are just, you know, hitting with some great questions and some challenging ones, right? I think, I mean, my question would be if this call is coming into either NCMEC or to Polaris or one of the many couple hotlines that exist. Our goal would be trying to identify, you know, where that child is and connecting the most appropriate local and federal law enforcement to try to help recover them from that situation. So, you know, if this is a missing child and you're calling into the National Center, we'd be collecting any information that you have, or this could also come in through our cyber tip line. And we would be, you know, seeing what information we could build on that situation and then looping in law enforcement. And Polaris would be doing the same, utilizing all the resources that we have to try to identify and locate and connect law enforcement to that individual.
Great, thank you. I am going to give it another minute or so just in case people are typing. I'll take that minute to once again extend my sincere gratitude to Samantha and Jewel. This has been a wonderful collaborative relationship, and we have enjoyed working with you throughout the last, I think it's been almost a year now. So we look forward to even more collaborations, and I would like to thank everyone for being here again this afternoon. Kudos to all of you for the hard work you do every day. I say that all the time. And that closes us up for Tuesday. I hope to see some of you back tomorrow at 12:30. Thank you again, Samantha and Jewel, and everyone have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.